So Substack notes I love them. I think they're great. I've really found some useful paradigm shifts, people dropping real thought provoking stuff. But at the same time, they still fall short of making a lot of change. Yet, it's one of the biggest things that drives growth on Substack. So that is going to affect how people operate in the environment of Substack, which means it's going to suffer from a lot of volume and lack of value to some point, and that may get worse with time. We'll see. But here's what Substack notes can't do for you, and even what Substack essays can't do for you, which is actually drive you into an experience where you have a real breakthrough. So I had a coaching session, and the individual in the coaching session reached a point of realizing his limiting belief. And his limiting belief that was holding him back from stepping into more of what he would want to step into from a business perspective and from a family perspective was that if he actually achieved what it is that he was envisioning, is that he would still be unfulfilled. That's a fucking, excuse my language, breakthrough. Because that is the underlying thing that is actually driving him to self-sabotage him. It's self-sabotage, why he's unmotivated. Like, until you actually change that belief, you're not going to change your subconscious patterns because by actually charging forward and trying to accomplish whatever your vision is or whatever you're striving for is, if you actually underneath all of that think that there's a risk you might still not be unfulfilled because something with your dopamine or the way you experience pleasure or joy is compromised, and those things should be what's motivating you, not just duty and responsibility, then you're probably going to hesitate to move towards those things. You're probably going to feel drained as you try to move towards those things. You're probably going to feel unsupported as you move towards those things. And reading any amount of Substack notes and stuff is not going to help you move through that. In fact, to some level, absorbing too much of that might actually cause you anxiety, might actually go the opposite direction for you. Taking in too much information without moving on it may actually just make you want to blow up, which we could have an argument on whether or not that itself is positive and maybe is the thing that you need. I'm not going to go into that here, but it's powerful. And the other side of it that is not often done enough when addressing a limiting belief is, well, what is the opposite limitless belief of that? And with this individual, it was so difficult for him to imagine what the limitless belief was because of how much he believed the limiting belief. And so he couldn't even feel what that was. He had to get analytical about it. Well, I can't feel it, but if I'm just going to be analytical about this, here's what the opposite of that is. The opposite is that I go and achieve it and I receive a level of pleasure that is, feels so good. But again, the problem was he couldn't even imagine what that would be like because he actually realized in his life he never experienced that kind of pleasure from pushing forward. It was always performance based. There's actually even a whole side of this that goes into sexual patterning because a lot of the motivation for this individual actually came from sexual patterning that he had worked himself away from. But as a result of working himself away from this toxic sexual patterning and this relationship he had with sexuality, working himself away from that, which he knows is good, has actually still left a void in his life for how he's now going to get pleasure. So even though that pleasure was not good for him, because for a host of other reasons, he still has a void for, I don't know how to feel good. Think about that for a second. And before, a lot of what drove his desire to be good at what he was doing, in part, was the desire for, if I'm more worthy, I'll have more access to the sexual pleasure I want. But now that's gone, so there's actually still a void of motivation for how that individual wants to move forward. That's not fucking willpower. That's not reading quotes to get motivated. That's real shit that people need to be held through and seen through so they can actually rebuild a way to feel joy in their life towards achieving something, to actually feel that sense of motivation. The pause here is intentional. That's all I have to say. Thank you.